They say the wheels of justice turn slowly. Boy, they turned really slowly in Hillary Clinton's case, and honestly, this isn't much. This is kind of a wrist slap. But years later, the Federal Elections Commission has now fined Hillary Clinton for the creation of the Steele Dossier, if you can believe it. Here to discuss this breaking news, Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, author of A Republic Under Assault. Tom, great to have you with us.
Hey, Vince, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
The Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC being slapped with a $113,000 fine. That'll teach them.
Well, the Federal Elections Commission is enforcing the laws about requiring full disclosure on campaign spending forms. And here they misstated what they were spending the money on, or so it's been alleged. And rather than battle the FEC, the Democratic National Committee, and the Clinton campaign, settled with this fine. Now, what we don't have are some of the details there, and that may come out soon. What I think is interesting about this is it highlights the criminal nature of what Trump suffered. This was not an honest operation. They were disguising what they were doing. They were not only hiding it from the FEC, which is, could be a crime if Durham wants to pursue it, but also hiding it from the American people. Of course, a lot of people knew who was behind it, but that wasn't publicly disclosed by their allied media. And we should also recognize there are two issues. There are two people involved here. You've got the Clinton campaign, Hillary Clinton, and a Democratic National Committee. So this wasn't just one little campaign engaged in an operation. This was the major political party that Trump was facing at the time that pushed this fake dossier, written largely by a Russian operative.
And it's another sign, as you pointed out, that every element of this dopey, fake, deceptive dossier was a lie. The funding itself was wrapped up in deception, and the FEC has just confirmed that. The compilation of the dossier was deceptive. The sources of the dossier were covered up. The information within the dossier lies. This is all deception, and we're only getting little tiny pieces of some sort of consequences for the Hillary Clinton campaign.
And, of course, their lying in these public disclosures made it easier for the anti-Trumpers in the FBI and the Justice Department to lie to the court and mislead the court about the origins of the dossier that was being used to generate unprecedented spy warrants targeting the Trump team through Carter Page.
Are you encouraged by John Durham of late? Do you think that's going to yield anything, Tom?
Well, 3 prosecutions and 1 plea agreement, including 1 plea agreement, is good, better than nothing.
Yes.
But it's been over 3 years since he's been appointed, and he's got to hurry it along.
Yeah, I agree with that. This week, I know there's another story that you're interested in, so am I, which is the saga of Hunter Biden's laptop. The Washington Post and the New York Times, very interestingly, within the last 2 weeks, have both come out and confirmed what you and I have known for a very long time, that the Hunter Biden laptop was authentic. Now, the Washington Post gave it the old college try and said, well, there's no evidence Joe Biden did anything wrong, when, of course, there's plenty of evidence linking Joe Biden to Hunter's business activities. What do you make of the New York Times and the Washington Post suddenly coming out and declaring that conservatives may have had a point?
Yeah, it's kind of like hanging a lantern on your problem, right? And with the hope that it goes away, you've exposed it, you've pulled the Band-Aid off, and maybe politically it won't have the impact it might have if something more substantive happened with the Justice Department investigation. Also, as you point out, it's the modified limited hangout. Let's put all this information out showing corruption, but withhold the core information and the reasonable conclusions that Joe Biden has culpability and liability here, given the other evidence that they know is out there highlighting his connections to this activity. And, the other major issue is how on earth could the Justice Department in the ordinary course make any decisions related to the prosecution of Hunter or whether to bring Joe Biden in for questioning? They can't. And that's why you have these special counsel regulations, which have been ignored by Garland, which to me is the biggest corruption scandal to date of the Justice Department, the refusal of Garland to appoint a special counsel in a case in which there's obviously a political conflict of interest and what the regulations are designed for. I'm not a big fan of the special counsel, but we were told those regulations were they might as well come down from Moses. And we were all supposed to fall on the ground when Mueller was appointed. Here we've got this president's son implicated. He's implicated, and yet zero political pressure or from anyone really demanding a special counsel. I mean, there are a few Republicans have asked some questions recently, but you don't have the cacophony that you had with the targeting of Trump. And Trump actually didn't do anything wrong to warrant a special counsel here. There's more than enough information to warrant a special counsel, not only for Hunter. Remember, Hunter's uncle and Joe's brother is implicated in this China money.
Yes.
And the idea that Joe, who had a key to the office, had nothing to do with it is laughable.
Joe himself is implicated in meetings that if it were Trump, we'd be looking at a third impeachment because, in Trump's case, remember, Don Jr. meets with a Russian woman called Natalia Veselnitskaya in Trump Tower. He's unimpressed by the meeting. He leaves early because he's bored. And that gets turned into a fever-pitch scandal. He's colluding with the Russians, and which, of course, yielded nothing. There was no evidence whatsoever to suggest that was true. And yet here you have Hunter Biden, the Washington Post this week, emphasizing that he made $4.8 million at least from this Chinese energy conglomerate connected to the Communist Party of China. And what the Washington Post doesn't mention is that the other American who was involved in this deal is a guy called Tony Bobolinsky, who's been on the record, who said that he met with Joe Biden and got Joe's blessing to conduct this business, and that Joe Biden himself was the financial beneficiary of this business arrangement with the Chinese government in that he was getting, quote, 10% for the big guy. None of this appears inside of the Washington Post story, but if you were an actual special counsel or at least an honest investigator within the federal government, that sure stinks to high heaven, Tom.
That's true. And this isn't just post-vice presidency action. You know, we had uncovered that Biden's son had flown 5 times to China with Secret Service protection before he ditched the Secret Service, which is another major issue. And as we all know, there was at one of those trips, he was on Air Force Two with Joe Biden. And again, for business meetings. And, you know, when you have illicit payments or payments that really don't have any merit going to the family members of public officials, what the alarm bells that should be going off are bribery. And this is a bribery operation. And I tell you, this is how the mafia works. And anyone who wants to listen to the national expert on RICO investigations, Rudy Giuliani, to the unpleasant realization, I'm sure, of the left, is an expert on it. And he sees RICO here through and through. And, you know, again, this information's coming out. It's being released in a way to try to limit exposure for Joe Biden. I know some have suggested they're trying to pressure Joe Biden here. No. Remember, we have all sorts of much negative information came out about Hillary Clinton, and it didn't result in anything going on with Hillary Clinton. They release it to cauterize the wound, so to speak, so Joe is protected as the elections proceed.
Yeah.
And this is why we need a special counsel. It's not a perfect process, but at least it will be more independent than the one we have here.
Right. I mean, here I am sitting with a lot of distrust for this Department of Justice. It's very well earned through the years. And the fact that it's, I mean, talk about a partisan operation. They have an entire Capitol siege division that they've begun populating within the Justice Department. They're hiring people to this day to continue to persecute people who trespassed in the Capitol. So this is not some sort of like disinterested party when it comes to establishing investigations. And meanwhile, we keep hearing these reports that Hunter Biden is being investigated. There's this grand jury that they're pursuing him for his taxes and maybe more. And the belief is that the Washington Post and the New York Times may have published all of this now to get ahead of whatever indictments might be coming from Hunter. But I got to be honest, I'd be very surprised if I see a Hunter Biden indictment in a million years.
Well, in the New York Times, you had Justice Department officials leaking to the New York Times, well, this Foreign Agents Registration Act that was used in unprecedented ways to try to, to criminalize activity by Trump people, namely Flynn and Manafort. Well, maybe we'll just use a civil remedy for Hunter Biden. Well, isn't that nice?
Yeah.
So, you apply it criminally to your political enemies, but it's a fine and a paperwork violation for the son of your favorite president, Joe Biden. Look, the Justice Department is run by partisan leftists who are Democrats. Now, there may be appointees from Republican administrations at time to time, but generally speaking, it's a Democratic operation, and we're seeing that with the handling of Hunter Biden's investigation, which is going on forever and a day.
Look at Merrick Garland's treatment of parents who show up at school board meetings. They launched an agency-wide effort to treat them as terrorists. I think that really tips their hand about where their partisan interests lie. You keep hearing the White House say whenever Jen Psaki is asked about Hunter Biden, and it's very rarely, it's typically Stephen Nelson at the New York Post who will ask these questions. She will respond, he's a private citizen, ask his lawyers, he has nothing to do with the government. When you hear that, what's the response?
Well, that's a non-answer. His father is the president of the United States. He was getting money from foreign nationals. What did these foreign nationals who were fronts for the government, both in Moscow, Ukraine, and China and elsewhere, expect in return for these payments that were not commensurate with Hunter Biden's experience? It was for something else. And we have evidence that Joe Biden was involved. There's evidence that Hunter Biden was paying Joe Biden's bills. There's evidence that parts of the money were designed, that 50%, remember he complained, 50% is going to my father. It's not just 10% for the big guy. I think it was probably more than that.
Right.
And the idea that just because someone's out of government makes him immune from being questioned about, well, did the money that your son made while he wasn't in the government end up in your pockets or to your benefit or the benefit of your loved ones, which is also criminal? And what did you know about that? Of course, and the question is, why isn't the Justice Department pursued this aggressively? And I asked that question knowing the answer.
Yeah, it's just very disheartening. But you know what? It takes a lot of digging, and you're just the guy to do it. Your organization, Judicial Watch, has done this for years. Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, and the author of A Republic Under Assault. Ain't that the truth? Tom, great to talk to you as always, sir.
Thank you, Vince.
All right.